How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana de Rote. Chapter 55. Holdan 5, Jaster 10. The morning of day 4, when Obi-Wan's Vergotten was over, was here. Holdan should have been reassured by the steady blink of Obi-Wan's tracker out in the wastelands. There was none of the urgency to get to Obika like Faye had said he'd feel if the kid used their familial bond. He'd told Obika that in survival situations, if you found good shelter, stay there. He'd pick Obi-Wan up no matter where he was on the 4th day. But the tracker was still in the exact same position it had been in since yesterday afternoon, and he just couldn't imagine his Obika sitting still for that long. He had a bad feeling about this. He took a land speeder stuffed with food, water, and medical supplies. There was no direct route to the blinking dot on his comm. Obi-Wan seemed to have wandered into a maze of intersecting canyons. Holdan had to turn the land speeder around at least once when they got too narrow, but an hour later he'd made it to the blinking light. For a moment he was distracted by the sight of the magnificent building in front of him. He had never seen a thriving tree out in the wastelands before. A sense of relief went through him since this was the obvious reason Obika had decided to stay in one place. Then he spotted the discarded brown robe near one wall of the canyon. He hurried over. Maybe Obi-Wan had lost or discarded his robe. It had been a modified and borrowed one from Komari Vosa, but it had still been a bit long on him. Holden's heart fell when he got closer. Laying half on top of the robe was Obi-Wan's belt with the lightsaber and clan sigil still attached. The belt had been cut by something sharp. Jaster had to admit that he never wanted Holdan Law to call him in distress ever again. The sheer devastation in the man's face and voice as he told Jaster that Obi-Wan was gone, it had hurt Jaster to see it. He'd mobilized Jan and a whole squad to hurry out to Obi-Wan's last known location. The Mirialan Knight Legro also came, since apparently he had an affinity for reading past events through the Force. Jedi powers were so weird. Once there, Jaster couldn't help gaping at the building that was Tare Vizsla's sigil at the top of the building. The Jedi Order's symbol on an ancient Mandalorian building. "He may be in the temple," said Dooku at his side. They were watching as Knight Legro knelt in meditation near Obi-Wan's discarded robe. "Temple." Jan gave him a look. "That building feels like a Jedi temple. The tree in particular feels strong in the Force." Like the tree in the book. He hadn't realized that was accurate. Jaster really needed to sit down with Jan or Jocasta and have them explain just what he could expect from all this Force Osik. Knight Legro got heavily to his feet and approached him and Jan. Holdan followed at his heels, face intense. "There's a holocron of Tare Vizsla in that temple." "What?" "Obi-Wan intended to stay here so he could share it with us when his Vergotten was over. While he was setting traps for food, Death Watch drugged him, stripped him of his robe, slave saber, and tracker, and took him out of here. From their comments, he was now the only child they had with him." Sick, that meant Death Watch had probably hit Sundari again, right after Kun and Faye left. Had nobody noticed? Maybe these canyons were part of their escape routes from the city, or maybe they had a base around here? It wasn't that far from Sundari. He'd send his Verde to scout. He cast one longing glance at what was apparently a Mandalorian Jedi temple. He would have to wait. "I'm calling the clans. We'll move on Death Watch in force." He'd just have to hope that enough Mando Adi responded to his call to make systematically searching Concordia for the Death Watch base practical, or that Kun and Faye turned up the location despite the Beskar blocking Force searching. "We need to contact the Council as well," said Jan. He also had to tear his eyes away from the temple. "The faster the Council's delegation can leave, the quicker they will be able to join in the search and rescue." Jaster nodded. "Let's get moving." They all startled when a growl echoed through the canyon. Jaster had only heard that sound in recordings before. The Jedi turned unerringly towards a rock on the canyon's side, taller than Dooku. Crouched on top of it, watching them very warily, was a Strill. Their yellow fur and brown leathery legs blended into the canyon walls. Knight Legro approached it slowly. The Strill inexplicably didn't try to bite his head off, but instead leaned towards the Knight. The two locked eyes for several long moments. The Strill huffed and shook their head, but hopped carefully down the rock to come stand beside the Knight. Jasper belatedly could see it was missing a leg and injured on another one. The knight headed over to Jasper, slowing his pace for the stroll next to him. Obi-Wan was hunting to feed them since they are injured and pregnant. They didn't get here in time to protect the pup, but wished to see him safe. The thought that a Mandalorian animal had also adopted Omega during his bird go then made Jasper want to laugh, albeit a bit hysterically. Could the boy get any more Mandalorian? This was also perfect for helping his bird. Hold him, said Jasper. Holden looked up from where he had been staring at his ad's robes and belt, which he had clutched in his hands. Jasper wasn't sure if he'd even noticed the strill. Hello? I'm charging you and Clan Wa with the care of this strill and its future pups. Obi-Wan will be grateful they're safe once we get him back. Hiam was looking intently towards the end of the canyon, where a large amount of small trees and brush crowded out the view of the far canyon wall. Fresh, if slightly warm water trickled out below the trees, explaining why the vegetation was so thick there. Nared came to stand beside his shari, Kiri's hand in his, wondering what the Jedi was staring at. He flushed when Hiam gave him an absent-minded peck on the cheek before heading towards the canyon's end. Where were you going? I sent something. Don't, said Nared. It's nothing alarming, said Hiam. Just interesting. Woke up though. Nared hefted Kiri into his arms. She was sleepy after the long hot bath, but he wasn't going to leave her there on her own. He had to follow Hiam closely since the Jedi seemed to slip with ease between the trees and shrubs, while Nared kept getting caught by wayward branches. The way opened up near the canyon wall, and Nared stopped in surprise beside Hiam. The spring bubbled out the wall between the roots of an ancient gnarled tree. White buds were on the verge of blooming on the tips of its branches. Hiam walked over to the tree and knelt, placing one hand on one of the tree's roots. What is it? Asked Nared. It was a beautiful and no doubt old tree, but he didn't understand Hiam's almost reverent stance. This tree is special, said Hiam in a hushed tone. The Force flows through it. I think even your ancestors knew. He gestured at the wall. There, just faintly visible due to years of weathering, was a stylized drawing of a mythosaur.